Change with Gigi, a show that aims to make the world a better place by bringing together authentic minds. This show encourages each of us to be the change we wish to see in the world. Get ready to be inspired and join us on this journey to create a brighter future for all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sparking Change with Gigi. I'm your host, Giovanna Tartarone, and today's show on Why Women Rise, honored to welcome a truly extraordinary guest, Michelle Jewsbury. Welcome,
Hi.
Michelle.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
My pleasure. And so, Michelle is an internationally recognized speaker, a coach, and a founder of Unsilenced Voices, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering survivors of domestic violence and abuse. Through her powerful journey of transformation, Michelle has become a global force in helping others turn their pain into purpose. Get ready to be inspired by her courage, her mission, and her unwavering commitment to helping others rise. Thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Excited. Super important topics we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. Your mission really inspired me to bring you on the show because so many voices are not being heard. And it's so important to let everyone know that there is someone out there that can help and never feel like they're alone. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you really embrace this beautiful mission?
Yeah, thank you so much. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town in North Idaho, and my daddy was in the military, so moved around my whole life. And when I graduated high school, I decided that I wanted to move to Hollywood, California to pursue an acting career. So I ended up packing my bags and driving to Hollywood and loved the glamour and the glitz and all of the charm that LA had. And I ended up meeting somebody who I thought was going to be my Prince Charming. And I say this oftentimes. I was swayed, right? I was swooned, I should say. And he courted me and sent me gifts and flowers and did all the right things. And about 4 months into that relationship was the first sign of physical violence. And I ended up staying with him for over 4 years. And because of what I went through, I started to document my story. And when I documented that story, it first came out in a play format. So I ended up writing and performing a 65-minute solo play called But I Love Him, and performing that at the Whitefire Solo Fest and the Hollywood Fringe Festival. That was in 2016. And that's when people just started coming up to me, Gigi, and they started to tell me their stories. And that's when I looked up at God and I said, what do you want me to do now? Because I hear you. So what do you want me to do? And he put on my heart to start a nonprofit organization called Unsilenced Voices. And Unsilenced Voices began in West Africa. So we did a lot of work in Ghana. We've expanded, of course, to Sierra Leone, and that's where the bulk of our programming still is. We've also done some work in Rwanda and the United States. And in 2019, I started speaking and coaching, and I published my first book with the same title as my play, But I Love Him. But the play was about 80% accurate because of theatrical rendition. And the book is completely accurate, except for some names, dates, and locations. And when I started to speak, I started to realize that it's really not about me, Gigi. It's about helping other people. So the listeners out there, about how they can overcome any adversity, not just domestic violence issues, but any adversity that you've gone through, and really be able to use your story to make an even greater impact. So we've developed a team of people. I run a nonprofit and also a for-profit organization, and I help people to publish their stories, help them speak on even more stages, and also to create courses and content. So there's a lot that we do. I'm very excited to be here and talk a little more about that.
Yeah. So it's amazing how, your journey of wanting to empower others came from your personal experience. And when you take a look at can you share a moment where you realized your story really needed to be heard, right? Like to empower others.
So I started to document my story just because I wanted to get it out. See, we teach, and this is something that is key for people in healing, is your tissues hold on to the issues. I know that's very cliche to say, however, it's very true and accurate. So what it is that you go through, your body will actually hold on to. And I needed to get it out. And my way of getting that out was stream of consciousness writing, um, theatrical, right? Going to
Yes.
acting classes and things like that. But when I first started to write, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, how is this me that I'm writing about? That was the aha moment of, wow, this could be a lot more powerful than I may be giving this credit for. Because when you're in it, you're just in survival mode. So there's
Right.
some things that I went through that I just it's so atrocious. And I just remember reading that saying, if this was somebody else I was reading about, I would be floored.
I was,
And
yeah.
yeah, and so I knew at that moment that I had to do something more. Now I didn't know how big this was going to
Right.
go, right? But I knew that that I had to continue to speak up.
And you became like an observer of your story.
It
Right?
did.
When you look at it from a different lens, right? When you're saying, okay, let me just take off these lenses and put on these, you're like, oh my goodness. And then also I believe, I mean, and I've been there to say, I'm probably not the only one going through this.
Yeah, no,
And
very
when
true.
you, and that's the big aha that you say, okay, what am I going to do with this? There's something bigger than me.
Mhm.
And, you know, through this whole process, I'm sure you went through a transformation.
Yeah.
You went through becoming vulnerable to even speak out, because a lot of people just don't want to make any noise and feel like it would, you know, mess up their reputation, or people will look at them and be late and they be labeled. Can you share if you had any of those, you know, thoughts in your mind, and how did you navigate that?
My mom raised me to be a strong, independent woman. So the fact that I got myself trapped in this type of situation was very shocking to everybody when I came out, because
Mm.
I was this girl growing up that you didn't mess with me because I had a mouth on me, right? And I'd get into arguments, and I would make sure that I would be respected, right? So it's interesting, when I went through this situation, I really kind of lost a lot of who I was in the beginning. So he sucked me dry for my energy and creativity. I am a very fun person. So even like when you coach with me and I'm teaching you, and you can ask a lot of my clients, I'm kind of goofy,
Yes.
but I like to have fun. And I think that life is meant for fun. Faith, family, fun. Three things that my first
Love
mentor
it.
talked about. But when I was with him, he really kind of sucked me dry of all of that. And I was always in the scarcity mode and worried so much. So it took a while for me to start to realize that I didn't have to stay stuck in that he and the words that he said didn't define me. So even after escaping, it took a little time. So the rehearsals of me going day in and day out of beating myself up on stage, that's really kind of what helped and helped heal me a lot
Yes.
faster, because you have to feel through that pain. And whether you do it through theater or writing exercises or a therapist, I saw a therapist for 8 years.
Right.
I needed that in order to heal. And that's what people, I hate to should on people, right? You don't should on people, but you should go to therapy, right? And it really does work. So yeah, there was a lot of moments where I lost who I was, and it took a little time to get it back, and that's okay. So if you're out there and you're listening to this, and
Yeah.
you're, experience any type of abuse, or if you've gone through something and you're trying to recover now, right? You can and you will, and you're not alone.
Yeah, and it comes down to making a decision. I believe that at some point in your journey, you came to an understanding or of saying, you know what, I'm done with this. Like having a very strong knowing that you were meant for more, meant for better, and and to start loving yourself and having that confidence. Like when someone drains your energy, you lose the confidence in yourself. You look at the world like it's against you. And when you made that decision, what took place that finally made that decision?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and the answer is very interesting because I was with my abuser and we were trying to make things work, right? So
Yes.
I had left and went to LA for a while, and then came back because he was in a different part of Cali. And when I came back, we were great, I want to say. See, domestic violence isn't abuse every day. Domestic violence can be abuse 1 or 2 days a month. And then out of that, you can have 28 days that are lovely and you're making love and laughing and throwing popcorn at each other. But really, my defining moment was when I found out he was having affairs on me. So I ended up getting his laptop because I couldn't sleep one night, and I was going to get on the laptop and watch a movie because he had a streaming network on his laptop. Yeah. So he was sleeping, and all of a sudden all these messages started popping up. And
Wow.
That's when I discovered, I was like, oh my gosh. So subconsciously, I was allowing myself to stay trapped with physical abuse, sexual violence, emotional manipulation, financial abuse. But when I found out he was cheating on me, something just snapped in my head. And it took about a week of me crying every day on the floor. I remember drinking a lot of alcohol at this time, trying to numb that pain. When he's like, please go back to LA and fix yourself, is kind of what he said to me. And when I left, I started to really kind of think, oh my gosh, what did I just endure for the last 3.5 years? And then it was November of 2015 that a young woman had contacted me, and her head went through our window in the bathroom. And that's when I looked up and said, okay, God, what do I do? Because he was still kind of controlling me, financially abusing me. 2015, I also lost my daddy, so he wanted to still take care of me, quote unquote. The financial abuse was extreme. He had maxed out my credit cards. I had a car that I couldn't afford that was in my name. So there was a lot going on there. But when that happened, I decided, oh, I should find an attorney. And I found an attorney and sued him for domestic violence. And we settled out of court, and she ended up taking him to court for a criminal case. And that's really kind of when I started to get my power back. So those incidents encouraged me to move forward. And that's when I knew that God still had my back, because he was always walking with me no matter what I was going through.
Yeah. And when you realize that, you become powerful. You make decisions that are serving you. When you know there's something greater, and you look back and you go, wow, how many miracles did I experience, during that time, where you say, I knew God was there. I mean, I knew there was something bigger than me protecting me. And just knowing that and be able to fall on that going forward is a blessing, in the sky when I think about it, even for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say this, because it took a while for me to understand. See, I work in fields where we help survivors of human trafficking, and a lot of these kids, I mean, some of this is awful, just gut-wrenching awful. And the devil is definitely at play on this planet. And, many people think, well, if God is real, because he is, then how does he allow this to happen? And it took me a while to be able to answer that question. And really, somebody said this on stage, that even in the midst of your pain and your trauma, when you think that God is observing, he is not. He is actually enduring with you. So just like how Jesus ended up dying on the cross and taking our sins and forgiving us, he endured the pain with us. So when I started to realize that it wasn't me alone experiencing all of the trauma, and it's not these kids alone experiencing this pain, that God is literally enduring with them. The Holy Spirit is experiencing the same type of pain. So he is with us throughout it, before it, and after it. So it really made me feel much better about the situation. And life is not perfect, right? No matter what, we're all striving every single day to be better, to make the day worthwhile, for example. And sometimes I even have to stop and remember that this is all a bigger plan, and that God has our backs.
Absolutely. And that's why when we're doing this when we're serving in any capacity and helping others, I absolutely view it in the same light that you just shared, because I'm not looking at myself. I'm looking at it as, what would God do?
Mm-hmm.
What would love do? I have a friend who says, what would love do? Because when you see it from that perspective, you understand we are one big family.
Yeah.
So what you're giving out is what you're going to receive back.
Mm-hmm. That is very true.
And, pouring your heart out to help others, you're really helping yourself, essentially, and helping God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had to go through a mind shift, right? You really changing your thoughts and rebuilding your identity.
Yeah.
From what you went through. And so tell us a little bit about that, because that brings you to where you are today. Like, you had to lose that identity and create a new identity because of now what you truly believe the truth is, and who you are, and the beautiful work you do.
Yeah, and experiences really kind of define how you pivot in life. And I've been through many different pivots. The specific one I'm going to get into
Yes.
with overcoming the abuse that I endured. But every couple years, I still go through a pivot and start to realize and understand even more, because the wisest person understands that they don't know anything, really. And the more wise I become, the more I want to learn, and the more I realize what I don't know. So, to kind of pivot into how I overcame the abuse. So I started speaking up and started to write my story. And when I wrote, like I said, it first came out in a play format. So I didn't really understand the mental shift that was going to cause me, because when you rehearse a play, you're literally repeating the words over and over.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that was 60 minutes, so an hour long of dialogue, of literally me yelling at me with the words that he had said. So when that all started to happen, the onion, per se, started to peel away from me, because the more that I lived through it, the more healing I could do, and the more realization that I had of what I had endured. And with that understanding, I started to also understand, well, the words that he said to me are not accurate then, right? The demeaning, the hypercritical, all of the things that he had said,
Right.
it's not accurate anymore. And I started to peel those away, because when you start to really believe in yourself and love yourself,
Right.
then what other people have said to you or done to you starts to just not matter anymore.
Right.
I also started listening to great CDs back then, right? And then now everything is podcasts and digital. But I started to listen to really great individuals and read awesome books. I'm a huge John Maxwell fan, so I love John Maxwell books. Of course, the Think and Grow Riches and the Napoleon Hill. But there's a lot of different books out there that are not necessarily just self-help. And one of them is The Shack. So I remember reading The Shack a lot. And when the movie came out, I was so happy. But my mental portion started to shift. And even for years after I escaped, it was very difficult for me to have a male passenger in a car when I was driving, because my abuser had assaulted me in the car as well. And I still had some PTSD and trauma. Well, I started to then believe in myself more and realize that nothing was going to happen. 80% of what we worry about actually doesn't happen. And that's something to always remember, because especially us as women, right? Why women rise. We tend to think and overthink and stress, and 80% of that doesn't happen. So that really kind of started to help. And then I ended up being, after I had started Unsilenced Voices in 2017, I was still a bartender, really kind of not knowing what I was doing. And then I felt called to start going to networking events. And I was like, why do I have to go to networking events? I remember thinking that, like, why do I want to do that? And
Yes.
I started to go to these networking events, and it was, I want to say, October of 2018. I ended up meeting my very first coach, Bill Walsh, and he had encouraged me, and his team encouraged me to go to an event in Las Vegas in December of that same year. And I felt called that I had to be a speaker. I felt called that that was the path that God wanted me to go down. And so I invested heavily into a speaking career. And it was through me opening my mouth and reliving and retelling the story over and over again that I started to kind of shed even more away. And it's still a process, you know, at 90 years old, it's still going to be a process of experiences that you've had, of not reliving certain things, but overcoming all of these things. But that's really kind of what started. And really it's just saying yes to what God is asking you to do.
So beautiful. And I absolutely know, I mean, first of all, Bill Walsh is a good friend of the Napoleon Hill Institute. So I've met him many times. He's got a beautiful smile and a big heart looking to
Yes,
help
he
people.
does.
So I know who you're talking about. And, you know, and so he's also making a big difference in the world with his story and trying to help people. But we're going to take a short commercial break, and we're going to come back, and you're going to tell us all about the beautiful work that you're doing. Okay, we'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so, you know, your mission is big, it's huge. And I know you're impacting a lot of lives, sharing your story, but share with us what are you seeing from the results, like the results of your story being shared? Because, you know, I have this platform and I'm doing the same, right? Come out, share your stories so other can also know that they're not alone, and the stories are really a way of healing, creating the healing within each of us. So yes, let's hear about your mission.
So I will tell you two stories. One is specific for Unsilenced Voices, and the other is specific for just telling your story. So first one, when I went to Sierra Leone, I had known a manager there that worked with a different organization, and he was let go. So I decided that, you know, I trusted this man, so I wanted to hire him. And when I was in Sierra Leone, this very first time when Unsilenced Voices was there, Philip is his name. He said, "Hey, I want to take you to a bar." I'm like, a bar? Why are we going to a bar? Anyway, so I ended up going with him, and we sat down and had a beer. And then he said, "Look around, Michelle." And I started looking around, and I saw all these young girls. And he said, all of them are sex workers. And I was so like flabbergasted at that point, because you don't see what you don't see until you see it. And at that point, right, I started to open my eyes. And when I saw these girls, he said, these are who I want to help. And I said, okay, let's do this. And didn't really have a plan, didn't know what we were going to do. But he ended up walking up to one of them, and her name was Matilda. And Matilda was spicy and very boisterous, amazing young woman. And we said, hey, we want to put you through vocational training and get you off the streets. And she said, okay, let's do it, right? And she ended up showing up the next morning at the vocational training center we had talked about partnering with at 6 a.m. I didn't even get there till 9. So she was waiting there for like 3 hours in the hot sun. And she showed up because she wanted to change. She wanted her life to be different. So we enrolled her in vocational training, and she started causing havoc with the teachers, and the teachers would WhatsApp me and be like, I can't handle her in class and all this stuff. But her spunky personality started to inspire other women and other young girls. We're talking 12 years old up until mid 30s. So there's a wide range of age that we help. And these young girls started to be like, well, I want to go through vocational school and get off the streets. And she just started to encourage, and she helped to build trust among our organization. So people in the community weren't looking at us like foreign individuals. They were looking at Unsilenced Voices as somebody and an organization that can help. And we started to enroll even more girls. And Matilda, we didn't realize she was HIV positive. And when we found out about that, she had already had full-blown AIDS. And she ended up passing away shortly after that in her village. So we have a Sponsor a Survivor program that is named after her, Matilda's program. And we have well over 60 girls on a wait list. But because of her influence, there are so many individuals now that have gone through vocational training, that have completed their schooling, that are off the streets, that are not being abused anymore, that are taking care of their family. Primarily it's young women and kids, right? And they're taking care of their family and not having to abide by what any particular man has told them or done to them. And it really started with Matilda. So if you are compelled out there and you want to donate, we really do need help right now. And you can go to unsilencedvoices.org. Again, unsilencedvoices.org to get more information on how you can donate your time, talent, and treasure. And as far as helping other people, so I run, like I said, a for-profit as well. And a couple of years ago, it dawned on me that I published my story. Why can't I help other people publish their stories? When that happened, I put out a call for authors and a call for people who had experienced any type of adversity that they wanted to share about and talk about. Well, I remember that first book, and I have a plaque right here from a woman named Martha Cartui. And when she published her story, she felt compelled then to also write another book. So these books, they have 20 authors in them, all telling their stories of different adversities, right? So Martha's story is that she was in a cult. She had experienced a lot of different abuse, but she decided after publishing her chapter in Breaking the Silence that she wanted to publish her own story. So she did, just a few short months after that, and then began to speak all around the world. So she used her voice to start speaking up. Now, this is just one client out of 100 different people I can talk about that are using their stories to now make a difference because they chose to say yes, because we are very supportive. You can come with us with any story, whether it's grief or depression, anxiety, loss, suicide attempts, addiction, abuse, you name it, all kinds of different stories. And we want your voice to be heard, because the more you speak up, the more other people then are positively impacted by what you had gone through. And oftentimes say that your story is someone else's survival guide. So it is really up to you to start speaking up, because if you don't, then they may not have that survival guide and may be stuck in their situation. So that's just one example of some amazing things. And you can find more information at michellejewsbury.com for that.
I love it. I love it. And it's our stories are not about are not for us to keep. They're
Mhm.
not for us to keep.
Yeah.
Our experiences are here to share with others. And there's a part of being vulnerable, right? To come out and share your story. But the impact that it's making, not only touching others to help them on their journey, but the rewards are great. Just the feedback that you receive and what can develop from that. I recently had a show about a young boy who had a car accident, and now he's asked to go. He was speeding. He was picked up his brother from school, or was driving him to school, and he fell. He was speeding, and he saw the truck coming, and either he's going to hit the truck or go the opposite way, and God knows what would happen. Well, he went the opposite way to save his life and his brother's life, and he fell down at like an 18 feet
Wow.
cliff. And so from his story being shared, he's now being asked to go to schools
Mm.
and talk about the dangers of speeding. Like,
Yeah.
how big is that? And now he's impacting how many lives,
Yeah.
right, from this mission. And obviously you're doing the same, just to show and prove that our stories are meant to help each other, to hopefully know that we're not alone, and to start shifting where you're stuck, because
Yeah.
this is the message that we're also sending, is your stories is allowing for you to open up.
Yeah. And sometimes people don't realize that they're impacting people that they don't even know. So, a very good friend of mine, her name is Angel Tussey. She's an amazing speaker and a coach herself. But Angel was over at my house recently, and we started talking, and she told me about the impact I was making. And I was like,
Mm,
yeah, that it's cool. It is what it is. And then she told me a story about something that she heard in church, where this man had passed away and he went to heaven. And when he was in heaven, God started pulling out names from a box of the people that he had made an impact on. And he started pulling out those names, and the gentleman was like, I don't recognize these names. Who are these people? And God said, these are people that you've impacted that you don't even know.
wow.
So, what's really kind of insane and amazing is that when you start to use your voice and start to speak up, you are not only impacting those who talk about you and give you credit, right? But you are impacting people that you may never, ever meet in your entire life. And that's the whole purpose of this.
And how powerful is that you
Yeah.
can actually save a life and you didn't even know you did?
Yeah.
Just speaking up.
Mhm.
Wow. So I want to ask, for those who are watching who feel called to help others, how do they begin to use their own story to inspire change, or even start a business or a nonprofit? Because this is something like it just doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
it's not in any books either, right? And this is why we're sharing this information. So yeah, how does someone kind of start with that?
You just start, right? So, what I mean by that is, if you're called to do something, don't wait, right? Because if you continue to wait, all of a sudden you're going to be 75 years old and say, what happened to the last 50 years of my life? If
Yeah.
you're called to do something, start a business, start a nonprofit, start a mission, movement, you name it, you start taking steps. Now, God can't steer a parked car, so you have to be moving in some direction, and He will come and steer you. And oftentimes, you don't see past that first step. You don't know if it's going to be a flat road for a while, if it's going to be steps that go up or steps that go down. You just see that first step, that first platform. Now, the next thing I'm really going to advise is you need to surround yourself with great people and great coaches
Right.
and mentors. I would not be where I am today without great coaches and mentors. I have a business coach. I invest in myself heavily in order to learn the skills that I need to help other people learn the skills that they need. So invest in a coach, whether it is me, whether it is Giovanna, whether it is anybody. Just
Right.
make that investment in yourself, because if you're called to do something, you need help. We can't go it alone, and God
Right.
doesn't want us to go it alone. So leaders take other leaders with them. Some people say it's lonely at the top, but it's only lonely at the top if you don't take people with you. So it's
That's
time to take people with you and really say yes to yourself, and hire that coach that you think that you can't afford, but do it anyway, because God will provide the resources in order for you to achieve the mission he has put on your heart.
I love that. I love that. And you know, what comes to mind as you speak those words is like, we're not in competition. You
Yeah.
know, our story is so unique to us, just like, you know, our fingerprints, right? No one has two fingerprints the same. And so this is where we take a different perspective on when we get into a business and we say, okay, we're here doing our mission, real, and from your story or whatever you know you've encountered in your life, and you make that a mission to help others with that story.
Mhm.
There is no competition. This
Yep.
is all cooperation. This is all bringing together unity. You know, competition, I believe, creates separation.
It
This is
does.
my feeling, and cooperation brings us together. Where, you know, that song "We Are the World," it's truly word by word. We are the world. We do make up the world, and if we can understand that we're here to serve each other in a greater capacity, not just, you know, working 9 to 5 and go home and watch TV and binge and say, okay, I worked for the day. That's it. We have such a bigger mission. And I say that our desires, you know, those are our gifts. Our
Mhm.
desires are for us to share. And a lot of us uh, don't acknowledge them. And like you said, you know, there's some people who will be 75 or even go to their grave missing out on really enjoying life because they didn't understand, or they didn't know that they had everything they needed or would receive everything they need to go on that whatever journey that they wanted to go on.
Yeah. And at the time of this recording, there's 8 billion people on the planet. And you started with talking about how there's so much competition.
Yeah,
And there is a lot of competition, and there needs not to be, like you said, because if there's 8 billion people on the planet now, you may be listening to this recording in a year or two from now. Okay. And there's even more people on the planet. We can collaborate instead of compete with one another.
love it.
There's enough resources to go around, and it's just you capitalizing on those resources. So if you help somebody and give a helping hand, um, and realize that, okay, they're successful, and their success will actually help to elevate your success, then there's no more competition, because Giovanna, you're going to have clients that are different than me, and I'm
Right.
going to have clients that are different than the person who's listening on their headphones right now. You
That's
know,
right.
and you know, the people that we impact, we are meant to impact. So if a client says no, you say, okay, great, they're going to go with somebody else, and you'll find somebody else, right? And there is enough people to go around, and enough people to help, and enough people on this planet to do something. And speaking of doing something, you know, impact is huge. So what
Yes.
impact are you going to make? And that impact doesn't need to be creating a nonprofit organization,
Right.
but I want you to take a stand for something. So if you are listening right now, take a stand for something. It doesn't have to be my mission. It just has to be something. Because if people stood up for what they believed in, we would not have the abuse. We would not have the poverty. We would not have the economic problems. We would not have the earth problems that we have now, because people took a stand. And our job is to take care of where we live. And a lot of the politicians and major influencers are not doing that. So it is not up to them to fix the problem. It is up to us. It is up to you who is listening right now to this
That's
podcast.
right.
It is up to us to make that difference. So take a stand for something.
And you know, you know, just to echo that is, we think we're just one person, and we don't how can we make a difference in this world? But it really starts with one person. It's like, you know, I met Tigo, I met Halava. She introduced me to Tigo, and then Tigo introduced, invited me to her events. And then I went to her events and I met all these beautiful people that I'm bringing onto the show. And so it's a ripple effect. You think you're alone, you think you're by yourself, and you have no reason why, God is calling you to do something. And then all of a sudden, it's like magic happens. Things that you did not know that you were really doing and impacting others just by saying, you know what, I am going to be the change I want to see. Because that's the quote from Gandhi. I mean, it's so perfectly said. We are the change that we want to see. And it all starts with us and claiming that we're here to serve something bigger than us.
Yeah.
And I love to hear, like, how did your life turn around now that, you use those lenses and you look back and you're like, if you only knew that this is where you're going to be when you were going through that, like how does that work out in your mind to
You
just
know
bring
what?
it all together?
It's so great that you asked that question, because oftentimes we're in the grind. And Alison Chavez talks about this really well. Okay. So being in the grind and then getting out of the grind to kind of see the bigger picture. Because on a day-to-day basis, I work my butt off, and I'm sure a lot of people out there do. And sometimes I don't see the impact and I don't realize where I was and where I am today. But because of you now, I get to do that today and look back, because I was a bartender pouring drinks, not knowing what I was doing with my life, pursuing an acting career, which I still love and plan to hopefully get back into that. But I really kind of was lost. And because of my experience, I then was given a mission. And not everybody out there will know what their mission is, right? You may go to your grave and not understand your purpose, right? But I think that God gave me a purpose. He gave me a mouth to speak with for a reason, So where I was completely different than where I am today. And I was a party animal, and I was not doing great things with my life, and ended up shifting so much because I was given the mission. And now looking back, it is kind of an aha moment. I pray to God that he blows my mind, right? I always pray, blow my mind, God, blow my mind. But he has, and he has, because standing here now and thinking of where I was even 10 years ago is such a drastic change. And I'm a completely different person.
Yeah, I love that, because, you just shared what, I myself, looking at my resume, I don't have a resume now. It's like, I used to create my own resume and be like, okay, what am I going to do next? But I look back and I go, yes, I got great education. I've excelled tremendously, from what I see, with all the plaques and all the certificates and everything else. But when you step into your calling, I'm going to say it, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. The calling and the service that we're bringing out to the world to make this world a better place is so far more fulfilling.
Yeah.
And giving us that peace and that understanding that, it's not about the title. It's not about the things you have and how many, things you've collected and the name brand stuff. It's about the impact, like you said before. It's the impact that you're making that opens up the world to know that we're here to serve each other. I love that. So what words of hope and message can you give to women who just, they love what they're hearing, but they're still afraid? There's that shift that needs to happen from fear to faith. And how can someone kind of like take that first step?
I like to quote a verse from a movie, from a famous movie, and the movie is called Finding Nemo. right? So I know a lot of people have seen this movie, and you probably already know where I'm going because I say this a lot. And in the movie, there's a fish. Her name is Dory, and she swims everywhere, and she has a 15-second memory. So she forgets everything. But there's one phrase that she always sings to herself: just keep swimming. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And if you're out there and if you're still kind of bogged down in life, in circumstances, in your experiences, and what you're going through now, what you've gone through in your past, just keep swimming. Because if you continue to put one foot in front of the other, you start to realize there's a huge land in front of you. And it's not just where you're standing today, but it's where you're going tomorrow. So just keep going no matter what.
Oh, I love that. I love that. There's it reminds me of that quote that says, winners never lose and losers never win. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Right? Just because we are all winners, we got the chance of being here on earth to experience all these beautiful lessons that they may not look beautiful when we're in it,
Yeah.
but when you do look back and you go, wow, what I've been through and what I'm giving back, like you at some point will recognize and say, I'm actually very proud of myself for taking that step into the unknown, because that's what you did too. You took a step blind, just having faith that you had a bigger mission. Can you share a story with us about like an impact that your organization has made?
Yeah. Let's see, I'll talk about Hawa. So Hawa joined our vocational training center that we partnered with in Sierra Leone. And Hawa, she started off and she ended up getting pregnant while she was in school. And unfortunately in Sierra Leone, she couldn't continue in school when she was pregnant. So she ended up having the child. She ended up naming her son after my daddy, which was amazing.
Oh.
So her son's name is Bill. And she decided she wanted to go back to school. So it's not a traditional school, right? So we believe in the entrepreneurial spirit, because in Sierra Leone, everybody has to be an entrepreneur. So the vocational training center she went back to, and she learned sewing, tie-dye and gara, how to work with a sewing machine and all this. She graduated last year and she just started her first business. So she has a little shop in Sierra Leone, and she's got materials, and she asked us for a micro loan so she could get some materials. So we gave her that. And now she has an apprentice, right, working with her and helping her. And she's making money on her own. And we found her selling her body on the streets, right, because she was in severe violence, and it was laid upon her shoulders to take care of her family. And I mean, her mom, her dad. So she was on the streets, and she no longer is doing that. And she now gets to make things with her hands and sell those garments instead of selling her body. And that's one example, right? And in the United States, for example, we did a tour in 2022 called A Blanket of Hope. And we went to the main hubs for human trafficking in our nation, in the United States. And those hubs were Tampa, Florida, Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, and Las Vegas. And we held this event, and it was more of a collaboration event with organizations. So lots of organizations came. We partnered with Amazon at a couple of them to bring different job opportunities. So when we did that, we started to meet individuals that needed assistance. So in 2022, we gifted over $33,000 to USA survivors of domestic violence and trafficking.
Wow.
And they were able to use those funds for relocation, for housing, for purchasing materials for their home, bedding for their kids. So a wide range of different things. So those are just two different stories with Unsilenced Voices. Yeah, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Amazing. And it really comes down to saving lives, where they may have felt lost, unwanted, unloved, and here you are with your mission, giving them the opportunity to let them know they are important. They do bring gifts to this world. And how does that make you feel? Because I tell you, when you're doing this type of work and you see the effects that it has on another soul, it's like, you're put on this earth for a purpose.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't see it. So even with me, there's oftentimes I don't see it because I become desensitized, and I have to bring myself back to reality sometimes to realize what people are really going through and how they're overcoming and what they're doing with their stories, because I hear so many stories, right? There's just been so much that I've heard. But then when I look at the progress and when I see these individuals who are making their lives greater because of an encounter, because of listening to a podcast, because of writing their story, because they went through school, right? It is kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
And that takes it full circle, because I ask God to blow my mind, and he is continually doing so every single day.
I love that. And I'm going to start using that. I'm going to call out to God, just blow my mind. Show me what you want me to do next.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so how does people, we're going to take it down to a landing. Your final thoughts?
Let's see. Final thoughts. No matter the adversity that you've gone through, it is your responsibility to speak about it. And it hurts in the beginning. So you're not alone when it comes to that. It is very painful to feel through your adversities. And once you start to do so, literally peels start to come off, and you then are able to do it more freely and with confidence, and understand that those experiences never have to define who you are, but you get to define what those experiences can do for you and for other people.
Beautiful. And Michelle, how can people get in touch with you? I see your website there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to donate to unsilencedvoices.org as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the story.
And Giovanna, I would love to give your audience a free gift as well, if that's all right.
Sure. That's beautiful.
So if you are in the United States, you can do this text. And if you text UV to 26786, again, text UV to 26786, like Unsilenced Voices, I can give you a digital download of the first book that I wrote called But I Love Him. So it'll be digital. But if you do text UV to 26786, and if you're not in the United States, that text opt-in won't work. So you can visit michellejewsbury.com, and you can still download it there as well.
Beautiful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us and for the beautiful work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you for joining me on Sparking Change with Gigi. I hope that our episode today has ignited a spark within you to create positive change in your own life and in the world around you. To learn more about how you can become a guest or supporter, head over to sparkingchangenow.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing, sharing, and leaving a review. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to me, and it helps me to continue producing content that sparks change in each of us and the world. You can find us on various platforms, including Google Play Store, Apple App Store, YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Android TV, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to having you join me again next week on Sparking Change with Gigi.